So we can start now. Thanks for joining. Today we are reviewing security gates feature, which is an upcoming, which is actually right now being worked on as a discovery to kind of understand how we can implement it or different directions we can go through. I'll give you kind of the high level of the problems we were solving or attempting to find in this discovery, and review some considerations for it, and then take a look at some designs and different directions of where we're at in this discovery. So the problem is on the customer side, the security analyst, being our persona, wants to have more control over the code that is deployed. That is specifying vulnerabilities that would block a merge request. Currently, we do have a feature, which is the merge request approvals seen in the merge request widget, but this does not give the level of specificity that the security analyst or security team would want in blocking a merge request with selected severity and selecting severity level of vulnerabilities that cannot be allowed to proceed for a merge request, and then also selecting a specific security approver. So it's a little bit different than the approvers that we see now in the approvals feature. The screen we're looking at now, just for context, is in our settings. I would show you settings, but my GDK unfortunately is not working. But this is where these settings are set for merge requests. And you can add members to approve merge requests in a project level. And then these are sort of different options and conditional rules that you can apply thereafter. Let me just open up. So one workflow that we have for this as an MVC, or actually, let me just point out some of the key considerations so you can kind of help analyze this a little through the same eyes that we were, is this has been a deal breaker for clients upgrading to Ultimate and using our secure features, because they want that control over merge requests with certain vulnerabilities that have not been fixed by the developers. So that's the hot button on the business side. This would be an Ultimate tier feature. So that's kind of the block for it to be upgrading, whereas the approval settings right now starts at premium. As security is, our secure features and defend features, of course, are very green. Our settings, there's not an exclusive place for settings, so we would have to reevaluate the information architecture of where we want to put these settings. So this project definitely surfaced that. In terms of the feature and design and the user experience, we don't want to create noise for the security team and the security analyst user. While they do want the control of being able to block merge requests with certain designated vulnerabilities, we don't want to create unnecessary noise for them, because there could be a lot of false positives with vulnerabilities in our scanning that we don't want them to be, getting pinged on all of those. Rather, and this is kind of an important consideration, is we want to make sure that the developers have the responsibility to deal with the vulnerabilities, but this adds a layer of accountability to the security team. So it's kind of a key distinction to consider as we look through the designs. The other thing is given DevOps and CI/CD, security features should not slow down the pipeline or the merge request process, the CI/CD process. So, we definitely want to consider that. Here is this would actually start, if you wanted to turn on this feature at the project level. A user who is a maintainer above would go to settings and then general and then expand security gates. And so this is where this is right now. Merge request is found here, merge request approvals is found here, and there was challenges of adding this feature into merge request approvals because it was fundamentally separate. But as we'll take a look later, is that it may be worth considering this as this product discovery has surfaced the consideration of, should this be a separate feature or should this be something that we put into approvals and kind of fine tune it that way? In the case of this flow, we separated it right here and we put it in its own section. So the user would expand this and they could toggle on security gates. And this dropdown is where they would set the severity level. This is an aside. I'll actually come back to this at the end. Want to just get your feedback about that with settings. But the next thing is let me go down to these designs actually. So once they toggle it on and they select the severity level that they'd like, it defaults at critical only. They then hit add approvers. So that's mirroring and leveraging the approvals feature that we have now. They add one or more approvers, which would be required for, again, for a critical level vulnerability to pass through a merge request. It would require this person's approval. And once they've added one or more people, it would be save changes. So that's following the design pattern in our settings area. So how would this then appear? It would appear in the merge request widget, much like the approval settings, because we're leveraging that feature that's already there. With the added text of security gate approval needed from X, Y, and Z person, whoever the designated people are. No other approvals needed, required. That has to do with the merge request approvals feature. So from here, one of these two, either one of the users from the security team group or Ada Lovelace, the user in this case, would approve this. But the key thing here to consider, going back to one of our considerations, is we don't want to cause a bunch of noise for the security team. This actually puts the onus on the developers. They see this. There's a couple things that can happen here. They can either go and fix the vulnerabilities, and then this message would go away if they fixed the or dismissed the critical level vulnerabilities, or they could ping the security team, since they have their names here, and ask for their approval for the merge request to move forward. So kind of going back to one side consideration, just to kind of help the user understand the settings. Right now we have this learn more that goes to documentation. But one thing we kind of explored in this case is, since these two are pretty closely related, but fundamentally different, there could be some confusion. So we kind of explored this idea to have this little question here that's clickable that says, how do security gates work? It could just give them a little bit more information about what this feature is without having to jump to another tab with documentation. This dropdown gives them the kind of 3 steps involved: designate an eligible security approver. Approval is required for merge requests with unresolved selected vulnerabilities. If vulnerabilities are resolved, security gate is lifted and security approval is not needed. So hopefully the idea here is that it can be a little bit more of a straightforward way to kind of tell them what the distinction is and how this feature works. As well as, again, going back to why is it separate from merge request approvals? It's because, in our current one, there are these optional conditional rules once you set approvers that would conflict with the requirements for a security gate approval. So anyway, that is the flow. Where we are at in terms of the product discovery is it really led to this key question, which is the proposed that we just went through this direction was aiming for a lighter lift, optimizing for delivery. Hey, let's get this out the door. and let's have people start using it. However, a more long-term solution may be figuring out how the approvals feature and security gates feature can work together. And a user then would create approvers and then designate rules around those approvals. So that's kind of where we're at now. Some of the considerations, again, is like that the two sort of conditional rules of the two features compete with each other. Another consideration is as security grows, so will settings. And right now there actually isn't a designated area for security settings. It's just in general. So just kind of designing for the future and kind of having a clean information architecture, it seems like it may be a good start to start splitting it. Because while it's a security gate split now, it may evolve into security settings, and that may have kind of a subset of security settings below it. And this is kind of an interesting consideration that I'd love your feedback and experience on, that you've maybe had to deal with this, but the approval feature starts at a premium level, whereas what we just reviewed would start at a ultimate level. So it's also designing around the tiers that we're designing around and how that influences the information architecture that we choose to go with. So that's where we're at. Any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I had a question that I wrote in the doc. Maybe you already went through that, or it's in the issue, and I didn't find it. Why not reuse the existing approvals feature, allowing users to specify approvers, so individuals or groups that are tied to security? So basically saying, like, these existing approvers, like this person or that group is a security gate and these are not a security gate, for example.
Yeah, the challenges there that we experienced, like, so just so for reference, it's a great question. This was literally why we ended up separating it out. This is the current merge request approvals feature, and basically how that would work is one ways that we explored that it could work is that you could have the toggle here to add security gates, but that conflicts then with these. So then the next step that you'd have to do is maybe you add an approver and then designate that approver to be security gates. However, so if you took that approach, then these options right here would conflict then with the designated security gate approvers, because it's a hard stop for, if you're designating someone as a security gate approver for critical vulnerabilities, the requirement is that's a hard stop until that's taken care of or it receives approval from that person. But these conditional rules right here, like for example, this can override approvers and approvals required per merge request, that would then conflict, that would override that person. So kind of going back then, considering that, you know, it would be more of a lift here to kind of do a bit of a redesign with approvals in general. It would be reevaluating these options here so that they don't conflict. And that's kind of like what I closed on, is we could go in that direction. It just seemed like a heavier lift. And then the other consideration is that security gates is for the next tier up. So maybe it was easier to separate it for those reasons. But
so I just wanted to ask, or just sort of ask one thing. So is the assumption that code owners and security gate approvers would be different stakeholders in this? So you could have, because I notice in some of our own repositories, there's, you know, a list of approvers for merge requests, but the assumption here is that security gate approvers could be different from those approvers?
Yeah, and that's actually the right way. That's another way of thinking about it, because the security approvers wouldn't be the developers. likely they would be on the security analyst side. So we have the developers, and then we have security analyst, and that's exactly it. So
you could have merge requests with just sort of like a pipeline of approvers to go through before something is merged. You have your approvers, security gate approvers, and once that's finalized, then it can be completed, right?
that's the direction, yes. And we do have a security paradigm where it's like absolutely no security settings can stop a pipeline. So this is why it happens at a merge request level.
Thanks.
So, and I'm glad that you and Pedro joined, because, you know, Lucas brought it to our attention too, in the issue that, you know, since this is settings, we should really connect, and this is an area that you all have been involved in. So in those two different paths of separating it out, or kind of taking this area and doing redesign with all approvals, I mean, do you have any other thoughts to weigh in on that direction? You know, maybe it's not as heavy of a lift as, you know, Andy and I were imagining, but also keeping in mind with the tiers, and also your thoughts on, as security grows, it's inevitable that it's going to need its own space in settings. So this seems like a sustainable direction to start evolving that settings space. So I guess with your experience in settings, what are your kind of initial thoughts with all that?
So when you say it would make sense to evolve the information architecture to have specific settings for security, why is that? I don't, can you explain?
Well, there's not really, there's not really that many secure features right now, and there's not that many resulting settings that affect secure. But as these features are added into secure, there's gonna be settings such as this one. And they're gonna grow in complexity such as this one, because there's gonna be a lot of conditional rules that need to be added onto this. Even with security gates alone, right now, the sort of MVC is that you select a security analyst approver, right? And then you select the criteria, which is a critical level vulnerability or a high level vulnerability and above, which would stop and require an approval. But that could very quickly grow to other things, like where you're kind of, you know, adding conditional rules and so on top of that, on top of just severity, it's like conditional rules could be stop X, Y, and Z from X, Y, and Z. Like that seems to be the direction that it would head in thereafter.
I understand. I think you just answered my question. Because this is only triggered if there's a security vulnerability that happens. It's not like, okay, so all merge requests must be approved regardless of security vulnerability by a security gate approver. I got it now. Gotcha.
Right. And we don't want to create that noise for the security analyst. Like that message at the bottom right here, that would disappear if the developer removed the vulnerability. So again, it's just when we're thinking about DevSecOps with developers, they have the responsibility for applying the security and taking care of vulnerabilities, but the security team has the accountability. So this is giving them the accountability. That's what it's aiming for, at least.
Yeah, I think it could go. I think both approaches have their pros and cons.
Yeah.
In terms of the information architecture, I would say we should do what aligns best with our users' mental model and where they expect to find things. I don't know. I'm afraid that having the two areas of approval, because you're joining everything also in the merge request widget with approvals, people might be tempted to look into the merge request approvals if they want to remove security gates or add security gates. But even as you were saying, maybe in the future you would eventually even move the security gates settings into another area. So that might be even more confusing because I don't know. I think there are a lot of good things about one approach and the other. I would love to see more than assumptions that this could or could not work. That's what I would say, because it's a big for all that is here. I think it's a big change nonetheless, adding this new settings area. It's not something that it's easy. I think it's easy to change in the future, but it's still something big. So I don't know if this is the MVC. I would say the MVC is piggybacking on the existing merge request approvals. That would be, from my understanding, the minimum viable change. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, even, having the role set, like how you have that assigned to security team group under the existing approvers to say, okay, this is, notify them for security vulnerabilities, and then that's the MVC. I could also see everything living under merge requests, the general settings area with approvals and, security regarding merge requests under that.
Hey, Kyle.
Yep.
Do we have a clear understanding of what we intend to be adding to secure this year?
No, I would say I don't think so, in terms of how it would maybe affect settings.
Maybe we have an issue open to explore security navigation at the group project and instance level. But in terms of features that would also require settings, it's unknown. We have this bill of materials, which could have settings in it, and auto remediate, which could have more settings in it, as well as license management, which is tucked into CI/CD. So there's more settings. So in terms of creating an information architecture that has more than one setting involved, we do have that in the, if we nested security features together.
Yeah, I was just curious because it's a little risky if we put something somewhere and then, let's say 3 milestones later, it moves.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can think a little bit more long-term, and if we are fully aware that we are going to have additional secure settings and we have a level of confidence that they need to be separated, or there needs to be this security settings area, then that should influence the decision here.
Mm-hmm.
That's, and that's kind of the direction that had us pull this security gates feature out of this merge request approval section. Just so that, it starts its own section and you start building the security features on here. And I think last week, Christine Shane pointed out that, well, eventually it seems like security would even, you should consider meriting its own section over here. Like general doesn't seem like an appropriate place. So
I agree.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to those two questions. It's to Pedro's point, is like the MVC, what is the MVC? Is it making it easier in leveraging the merge request approvals that we have today and just putting it in there? But then that discounts kind of the long-term strategic information architecture initiative that you're kind of alluding to, Valerie. And that's kind of where we're at, is like, well, which direction do we want to take on that, and which one makes more sense?
Well, maybe we can explore to Pedro's point about like an MVC, we explore integrating it into merge request approvals. And then once the feature kind of makes its gains in maturity, we kind of then are able to have more flexibility and pull it out and then put it into its own settings area. And then that can be like a big, like, hey, now we have this area for settings and here's all the settings, as opposed to just anticipating that from the beginning, because we have the designs for what that would look like in its second or third version or its final form. But it would make sense to MVC integrate into the way we do things today. And if we identify through some type of research or any other means that it should be its own separate thing, then we can react to that, as we've already kind of anticipated in the designs, but it might be easier to integrate.
Yeah, it's exactly that, Andy. I think, and that's the point of the product discovery issue is, it's not just to find out what the MVC is, but it's to kind of paint the picture of what is ahead. Like what are we looking for in terms of second or third iterations on top of this? And as you progress along that iteration time span, like the first, second, third, things start getting more blurry, right? We start having less and less confidence, but at least we can see more or less where we can go, and that can help us along the way. And yeah, I think that's the way GitLab has worked so far, is like doing the MVC, seeing how that acts out in the wild. For some things it works, for others there's so many questions that we need to do research. I'll leave it up to you how confident you feel about certain things and if you need research for them.
So it sounds like we're pretty sure at this stage that eventually we're going to have a security section in the navigation, security settings section. Am I right in thinking that?
We would like to explore that as an opportunity to begin grouping features as we grow our feature set. But
Okay.
I'm kind of 50-50 on it, but.
I mean, it should be, it's definitely like to Pedro and Valerie's point, is like this discovery kind of surfaced this question, and it merits its own issue to kind of at least audit what settings and what features may be coming down the road. And so we can start thinking about that.
Yeah, so if we had visibility, if we already knew what kind of settings we might put in a security settings area, this could have been a good candidate maybe for tree testing, because to Pedro's point, it seems like, if I understand correctly, the question is, where would a user expect to find the security gate approval widget, or if that's the word. But if we don't really know or have a suggestion for what that settings menu is going to look like down the road, maybe I can actually, it's worth a chat with Sarah and Catherine. They've done a lot of work around navigation. I'm still not caught up on that. Maybe there's something there that we can do in terms of research that's more exploratory as opposed to testing a given option. Don't know, I have to think about that.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to point out, and we're already over time, and Marcel, I before this call, I suggested to Marcel, wow, you should add that issue that you're working on so we can discuss it. I just wanted to finish, and I will stop talking, just to say that, of course, research needs to be done to figure out that navigation and that settings for security. But I just, again, not having a lot of information, I'm not working with the security folks. I just want us to be aware that sometimes we want to make things our own and have our own space, when sometimes it's not necessary. It's like that that big problem that web designers have, that each department of the company wants to have a slice of the homepage, you know? It's a bit like that. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing and oh, we should have our own space and we need our own settings area. Maybe that's not it. I'm just putting that out because sometimes it's something that is unconsciously motivating us. But at the end of the day, good research will tell us what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We don't want to ship the org. I think that's kind of the phrase that people tend to use. But at the same time, we should look at how others are doing this. And it's very, like, having a security area is not abnormal. It's pretty common. So we need to take that into consideration too. So I don't have the answer. I'm not saying that we should go one way or the other, but we definitely need to look into it. And I think it's great that this conversation has come up so that we can take the next steps.
Awesome. Well, I think we're over time, and thanks for joining, giving feedback. And if you have any other thoughts, please contribute to the issue that we're on with this. Thank you.